Like turn on system or something.
We're on.
Test. There we go.
Hello?
You can admit Doug. That's all right. Pat, can you hear us online? Go ahead and hit admit for Doug.
Okay, we're gonna go ahead and start the March Planning and Zoning meeting. You good? All right, first item is the approve the February minutes. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
No.
All in favor, say aye.
Yeah, it's a voice vote, so.
So I say that?
Yeah.
Yep,
Yep.
all-
All in
all-
favor, say aye.
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 All opposed, say nay. There you go. Next item will be the staff report. Jack, what you got?
You should have a memo on your desk. It's the one I sent you yesterday or this morning. I don't remember which. Things have been running fast. And it relates to the Lakeside Farms Development Agreement. Specifically, the one that was approved by this commission in December of last year. And approved by the Board of Aldermen on January 7th of this year of 25. You may recall in late October of last year as well, we had Clay Creek Meadows going in, and their development agreement gave them 159 units up front in one phase, and then they couldn't do the second phase or the third phase. They couldn't go any further than 159 units until such time as the wildflower upgrades on the pump station there were taken care of. And that's because of capacity. We have two sets of capacity numbers. If you were the board and the mayor, the board members and the mayor will recall from a retreat a year or two ago where we discussed the capacity. And in 2021, when we did our sewer master plan, there were 265 available units on the North Force Main. And upon completion of improvements to Wildflower, there would be an additional 320 added to that. So there'd be 585 total units. Those numbers have been going down. Greyhawk has added lots to it. And so those numbers have been going down. So that's why Clay Creek had 159 and then had to wait for Wildflower's improvements which would then add 320 more to the mix. Their schedule at Clay Creek was based upon the ongoing negotiations with the folks at Lakeside Farms. And in that one, they were going to be completing, in effect, the upgrades necessary for the Wildflower Station capacity to open up. The capacity opens up in one of two ways. Either the city does an improvements to the station with new pumps, and to clean up the rails on it and stuff. Once the new pumps were installed, then there would be 320 units. The secondary way would be, which was what was proposed, was to take that station offline, run all the flow to a new station that would pick up both Lakeside and Wildflower. So we would still have one pump station. It would be upsized pumps that would make the whole system work. We'd still have the 320, and there were several other added benefits to it. We were notified last week that the developer at Lakeside was likely going to have to pause their work there for approximately 2 years, which is way beyond our anticipated progress moving forward. In that agreement, from January with them, the city would not have to have performed the upgrade to Wildflower Station because they were going to take care of it. Their plan was to move forward immediately. They've notified me that they're going to postpone it for at least 2 years. As a result, we've got another development that is going to be restricted if we don't do the improvements that we have online. In your memo, and I was just speaking earlier, what we have is a scenario where in 2004, the engineers, at the time it was ET Archer, but they've become HDR. They had determined on our North Force Main, based upon anticipated growth at that time, that when Grayhawk put their third pump station in, they would need to upgrade the impellers or pumps. They didn't know for sure at that time without an evaluation for the Wildflower Station to continue. When they got to their third station and ready to put it in, our engineers were like, we had 2008 happen, which meant no growth, no construction, especially up there, up north. So with that, it changed the dynamics of the entire system based upon what they had made the assumptions for. So they said, don't make any changes now. They're not necessary. They may be different than what they are when it comes into play. So we paused. Now we know what those are, and those evaluations have been done, and we know what the pump stations are. The city was preparing to do it with Grayhawk's assistance. Grayhawk's development agreement from 2004 required them to pay 100% of the cost for doing that. So where we are is we have a development agreement that will, based upon the statements from the developer at Lakeside Farms, it will effectively run out of time. You get 2 years from the date of approval for your preliminary plat to take the first portion forward to final plat. They won't be able to do that, or they don't have plans to do it. So that means they're going to have to come back. Based upon all the other factors I just mentioned, that we've got another development that would be hanging out there waiting for that to happen. Staff's recommendation is we perform what our obligations were and get the Wildflower pump station upgraded. What that means is, as well, that the development agreement that was the linchpin of the preliminary plat for Lakeside Farms can't be performed. It's based upon all the negotiations in it are based upon them completing that and not the city not doing any work. So our code, it's cited in the report as well, allows this commission to, within 6 months of the approval with changed conditions, in this case, substantial justification, you can require them to resubmit. I wanted to get this information out to you at this meeting at a staff report to notify you that we would likely be bringing that to the commission at the next meeting to rescind that approval and require them to resubmit. So that and it's basically so the development agreement can be renegotiated when they're ready to go, so we know what's going on at that time. The 2-year provision I talked about, the reason it's there is if there are changed conditions as well. So if we did nothing and got to 2 years, we would require them to do it because we may have changed our standards. The conditions in the development area may have changed. So that's why this provision's there. And in this case, we wouldn't have to wait the 2 years if we do it within 6 months and for a substantial justification. We believe that it
Simon
would.
wants a treat.
That's ultimately a substantial justification is your determination that you'll be
You
making.
can't hear me in the other room, but you hear a damn dog.
I thought you were talking to me.
We can hear you here, by the way. So we will be bringing that forward for you all to make that determination of a substantial justification and require a replay of it.
That one, get Kelly.
Okay. Are there any questions about that aspect of the staff report?
Yeah, I mean, just to clarify, make this simple, we're only going to rescind for the one development that can't take place within the next 2 years. So it's not going to impact any other plans, whatever. It's just for this particular.
Right, that this development will have to come back and figure out how they're going to proceed. Their design may likely change because I don't know that we would want them to replace brand new pumps and take that system offline. We'll have to see when they're ready. This gives the city the ability to keep moving forward as we've always planned without being tied to something that, a weight around our neck that we don't want. They will then be able to come back and do whatever they need to do at that time.
And do you think there's gonna be any pushback from the development on that? Is that,
They are currently evaluating I informed them of this, that we would be coming forward, mentioning it tonight and likely coming in April for that request. They are reevaluating their scenario to see what's going on. The only way that we would recommend that they stop or that we don't rescind it is if they start work. If they start work, we're good.
or if they say they can start work within the next 2 years?
No.
Okay.
No, because we need to have them start work.
Okay.
If it's, yeah, we can start in 2 years, we're going to be in a scenario
Or
where.
within 2 years?
Right, and everything we planned on during the negotiations with both Lakeside and Clay Creek was that Lakeside was going to start their work. We knew what rough estimate of how long it was going to take to do the build out of the 159 units. So all parties were aware of this. We were talking with all of them on the same subject. And it was integral that the pump station at Lakeside Farms go in and take out Wildflower.
Sounds good.
Yeah, I agree. I think it sounds good to move forwards proactively sooner than later, because even if, we rescind it, if we don't rescind it and they could start doing something in a year, you've already done other work here, it sounds like. So I think we'd be better to rescind it right up front. And even if they
Right.
come back to us in a year, things have changed.
Right.
So,
Even if we finish the work on Wildflower and get those pumps installed and everything's good to go, they can come back in, a month after that and start the process again. Either way, they can. But we have not evaluated whether it would be worthwhile for the city or for them to take out a brand new upgraded pump station. Keep in mind, it's the guts that are going to be changed. It's all new pumps, the rail system, that kind of stuff to make it work. It won't be any, overflows or any of that stuff. That make sense?
so I guess if we were to do that, would then that free up Clay Creek Meadows with their other 57 units, or would they
Yeah.
still?
Yes,
Okay.
they would have the ability to construct the rest of theirs. And then if somebody else came in on that North Force main and needed to use some of those, we'd be able to move that way as well. Just kind of depends on what happens.
Jack, if I understand correctly, the developer for Lakeside Farms, part of the negotiation was they were 100% responsible for the upgrade of the pump station. Is that correct?
Well, in effect, yes. They weren't going to upgrade the station. They were going to delete it. They were going to tear it out. But all of the flow that goes into it would go to a new station that they would build that included the capacity to handle their flow and Wildflower.
Okay.
So it'd be a bigger station, bigger pumps.
And then was the developer for Clay Creek Meadows responsible for any wastewater developments, improvements, anything?
Yeah, they have obligations at the Diamond Crest lift station. They have to do some improvements to the detention. And if there's an overflow of waste, there's a detention basin. They have to go in, clean that up, repair it, and make it a little bit bigger.
So we're talking about two different wastewater treatment areas, correct? Or are they connected?
Well, they're all connected. Everything on the North Force Main is connected, which includes Harborview, Rollins Landing, Grayhawk, Wildflower, Diamond Crest, Lake Meadows, Harbor Lakes, Rock Creek. So all of them are on it and they all go down to the main one. And so the interceptor that will be constructed that opens up the flow for all of it from a capacity standpoint would take it out up to the point where the Harborview line that goes through Grayhawk connects with a line coming down. It's called the Oak Point Force Main, which goes up to Diamond Crest. There's a connection point for Rock Creek in that. And then it goes all the way up to Harbor Lakes. So all of that stuff up north, including Rollins Landing. Rollins Landing comes over and connects into it as well. So all of those that connect, where they meet, when that joint where they all join goes into a gravity flow system, at that point, the capacity up north opens up. Huge
Okay,
tons. So,
thank you.
sure.
Any other questions? All right, we'll move on to item number 4, accessory dwelling units. We're not making any motions. We're just going to discuss, right?
This is purely a discussion item.
Okay.
I'd like to introduce you. Some of you have been talking with him and have met him before. Will Stubbs has done the research to start the presentation. You may recall in the comprehensive plan, it lays out, do an analysis of the benefits and the burdens, a SWOT analysis of accessory dwelling units and whether we want them, if we do, how, why, where, why, and how, and what. So what Will has done is conducted some research with some assistance from the Mid-America Regional Council, who also had done some research. And he's went through their research, and he has a slideshow to present to you all that kind of lays out what the issues regionally, what we've seen.
Thank you. Yeah, so I've done way too much research in the past 6 months. Like 6 months ago, I didn't know much about accessory dwelling units. If you like that, I recommend going to this left QR code. That's going to bring you to the Mid-America Regional Council. They actually recently updated that site, and it's got a great, quick, concise background stuff that I'm going to be going over now. And then at the bottom of the page, you got the local ordinances, so you can go into deep dives of specifics on stuff. The other QR code on the right is just very comprehensive study. It's been done recently. To think about. So what are we talking about here? Accessory dwelling units. Grandma needs to be taken care of, and maybe you need to set up your basement area, something like that. Where do we want to allow it? If we're allowing detached or attached rather than just simply the in basement finish, because we don't have to allow detached. Some people don't. But if we allow it, say agriculture areas, are zoning usually. Sometimes they'll have specific restrictions in the ordinance for the Old Town districts or B4. We can write in something for that about sizing and prepared in comparison to the lot size and the size of the dwelling, so that may mitigate some of that stuff. A lot of the ordinances don't talk about lot coverage. So they just keep in with their normal 30% or what is it? What have you? We are at 30% for our residential. So Jack and I were talking about that, and some of the new builds, they're already at near 30%. So they probably wouldn't be allowed to put something in detached if we go that route of not changing that ordinance. Most ordinances have something about overall looks. It's, it has to be complementary to the home, similar materials. Most of them will not allow mobile homes, trailers, movable tiny homes, stuff like that. Some of them go as far as they don't allow you to have an entrance in the front or a stairway to the second story dwelling in the front of the home, just for looks. Whether or not we want to allow short-term or long-term rentals in these ADUs. That's because a lot of the ordinances around in order to mitigate crazy stuff happening, parties, what have you, or just any number of things, put in some way to restrict that. And we'll talk a little bit about that more. You can put it in the deeds. You can have them attest with an affidavit. You can put it in the, you can put it in there. I can't think of the word for it right now. The occupancy permit. Yeah, there's a lot of ways to go around it if you want to restrict certain things for it. Utilities. after I've done more research on this, I thought I should have left this out. Because in the code, it's pretty much a no-brainer. If you have a new dwelling, that tenant needs to have access to all the shutoffs, electrical, even gas shutoff, something like that. And, you know, we definitely want some wording in there that it's sufficient for the size of the dwelling. So, we think about like impact fees whenever we're doing residential new builds. So I believe this would be accounted for it. And maybe, I don't know how that would work, if we'd have to add plumbing fees, if we had certain amount of traps or something like that.
If I could, Will, I'd like to kind of clarify one point. A lot of the stuff he's talking about right now is dependent upon whether it's an accessory a detached building or an attached. If it's in the building, it's going to be one water, one sewer. There may be their own power switch or whatever, but it'll all be through one meter. So there won't be any additional impacts, because the more water, the more cost, the more water, the more cost on sewer as well. So it would balance out. There wouldn't be 2 meters if it was inside the building. The bigger question becomes, if it's a detached, how would we handle that scenario? Separate meters, how that would occur. We just have to have you guys evaluate what you thought was best, and then we would make up rules to allow us to enforce it that way.
So if they had a separate building without a separate meter, it would still be on their service line side of it anyway, right? So it's just like another line in their house or sprinkler system or something else.
That's possible. We could do it either way. I mean, that's where we sit. The more independent you make them, the more like rental units, like an R2 scenario, it becomes, the more connected they are, the less likely that you're going to have a rental scenario. And Will's got other stuff coming up that we'll discuss that part of it as well.
Parking, this might be something to talk to our first responders about, whether or not we want to have an additional parking space that's not on the street. They'll even go as far as if your driveway is not wide enough, you got to put in another one because you don't want to be blocked in. One of the biggest considerations to have, I know this is hard to see on the screen here, but if you look on your sheet, this is the whole rundown of most of the ordinances around town, around the Kansas City metro area. If you look around the middle of that, that's about where we are. Lansing, Parkville, Gladstone. So if we were thinking about limiting sizes for these, lower end 600 square foot, upper end 1,200 square foot, and that 1,200 is in line with the 2024 IRC appendix that they have. So that would kind of make sense, but they have a little bit larger lots around there, so just something to consider. But this is, I don't know if there's too much to consider if 400 is like your standard tiny home. If you want to have minimums on those as well, you can do that. Just for, how much space is this person going to be able to live in? Some requirements that a lot of jurisdictions have: owner occupancy requirement. They have to either live in the primary home or the ADU. Lee Summit offers something to where, they can be gone for a year for sickness, employment, whatever. That might be a good idea. The ADU can be in either the primary or a detached building, if we allow the detached. There must be a primary residence. You can't just put a tiny home on a plot and live there. Everything else, we gotta have same ownership for both of them, so you can't just sell the lot that the ADU is on. That's usually in the ordinances, and having one ADU per is also on there. Some will allow 2 ADUs, but most of the ones around Kansas City is 1 per. we need to think about setbacks and if we want to increase those or change them up. We had a couple emails back and forth with Chief Klein. Because I'm thinking safety wise, there's only 5-foot fire separation between any detached building from your primary building. That's the code. Chief thought that 20 feet might be better. I'm in agreement with him.
And that's if it's an occupied structure, like
Yeah.
a habitable structure versus, you know, a barn or a garage. Yeah, yeah. But if it's something where somebody's gonna live, I think he's a little more concerned about the fire risk.
Yeah, Douglas County goes 25 foot. A lot of them around here, if they address it, it's 15 to 20 feet. Just because there's nothing else in the IBC or IFC code that gives it that big of a limit. So definitely want to have something there, not to have it in the front yard just for aesthetics. Need to have something in there about complying to all building fire codes. So we'll get into some more strict things to
Hey,
think
I'm getting
about.
some reports that the volume may be too low on you speaking. Could you try to
Oh,
maybe move
sorry.
closer if possible?
Sorry.
Thank you.
So when we were talking earlier about whether or not we want to allow short-term rentals or that the owner has to live there, you can put it in the deed restriction with the county itself, or you have a notarized affidavit. We can have them update this every 3 years. Little things that we can do, but in the end, Jim and I, the other building inspector, were talking about that. In the end, we don't really have much enforcement. So if someone were to, violate, it'd be kind of tough to stop them, I think. But there's citations and stuff like that, and it goes so far. But something to think about. One of the jurisdictions actually put in there, if they weren't following the ordinances, they were responsible for demolishing the ADU. You can go that far. Some other little intricacies. Miami County said that it has to be physically attached. I believe that the reasoning on that's probably for fire safety. Do we want to allow business use in the ADU itself? This one, the lots that are less than 15,000 square feet, keep that ADU to 500 square feet or less, or 50% of the principal's floor area. So that's something to think about for our B4 district or smaller lots. Separate addresses. I think this is kind of a no-brainer, have an AB unit. Whether or not we want to only allow family members in there or have a caregiver might be a good recommendation, just to keep it if you want to stay away from having it a rental. Limit the overall height. This is just regular building, kind of standard building code stuff. Thank you.
What happened?
Let's see, there's one behind. I've been starting to think that this might be a better option for us after our email with Chief Klein having it a special use permit for each instance, just for fire safety and for first responder. But with these ordinances, just kind of wanted to hit it home with, you can keep it as restrictive, or you can say as little as you want with it. But questions we need to be considering, what's the motive on it? In the comp plan, it more talks about more aging in place rather than rentals or affordability. Do we want to allow it by right? Just set the ordinance out. That's more work now, less work later. And we have less control over it. require owner occupancy, whether or not we want to have deed restrictions or allow for rentals or have them sign things to attest that they are going to abide by the ordinances. The fire separation and means of egress, as I thought about it more and more, it's really a no-brainer of how that would work. The code's pretty simple on that. If you want to know more, ask me questions about it. Be happy to answer. Do we want to require an engineered design on these? Is that an undue cost burden? I can prescriptively like read a plan now and be comfortable with it if it has enough info on it. Year and a half ago, I'd say no, I want an engineer stamp on it. But Jim and I are pretty good at reading plans these days.
I will add a corollary to what you're talking about there, Will. The risk we run if we don't require some stamp on those plans is, and it almost invariably falls back on, they want to be walked through how to design it. And ultimately it turns into our building inspectors designing it for them. Well, you can't do that. You got to do this way. And, oh, well, how's that work?
And we run into that right now with fences and other things, right? Like,
Yeah, I would
Next.
prefer that our guys are reviewing plans, not instructing on how to meet the code. That's what that's what the designers are for, from my perspective. It does add cost. It does add cost.
but also our inspector's time is a cost.
Sure, sure. Well, and from my perspective, if it's a detached new dwelling, that's one thing. If it's a basement finish scenario that Will mentioned earlier, it's another. We don't require a design professional for a basement finish.
Right. But we require engineered plans for detached garage?
Yeah, I think, yeah, they have to be stamped, don't they?
Well,
I don't see them very often. I don't deal with them,
Okay.
so.
I think we could do that. Sometimes we'll do that prescriptively for detached garage. Well, actually, if we're calling it a garage, if it's a part of the residential build, then if we're calling it a garage, then yeah, we will have a stamp on it. A lot of times I'm just thinking of outbuilding.
What about like Morton buildings that get added on
Yeah,
the
I'll-
properties we require engineered?
I'll get
plan
that
above?
without a stamp sometimes. That's just if there's enough info on the plans, really.
Right, you may get a pole barn scenario, you may get a product, one that is a package, and you get the package that
But it's
comes
an
with it.
engineered building, usually.
Right, but it may not be necessarily a
Yeah.
Missouri-based engineer that designed it. It could have been somebody that designed it to kind of be generic and fit anywhere,
Gotcha.
meet the general wind loads.
Right. Okay.
So those are things that we'll be needing to talk about over the next couple of months.
Yeah, and that's pretty much it. Other standard stuff, do we want to, make the neighbors be notified every time putting up an ADU? Once again, do we want to allow the detached ADUs or shipping containers or RVs or tiny homes? How do we limit occupancy? Do we do that by size? Do we do that by limiting what they have in their kitchen? And just a couple other things for the first responders. As I mentioned before, might want to have their thoughts on it about parking, addresses and utility connections. They might have something to say about it.
Yeah, I know during the comp plan, this came up quite a few times, so I appreciate all the research you did on this.
It was fun. I know all about it. ADU.
A lot more about it than you intended going in.
Well, like where you're at, Jack, in St. Joe, you got carriage houses, and a lot of cities that with older homes have carriage houses that are ADUs, and
Sure.
they're everywhere, right? Like,
Sure.
but-
Well, and up there, there's a lot of World War II housing, what
Yeah.
I call World War II housing. There's the main house, and behind it's the old garage that had been converted in the 50s or
Right.
40s into housing, and it's still there. I
Yeah.
live on a road that has 10 of them in a row.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's
100-year-old homes
Yeah,
with-
I'm sure there's some floating around here too that we just
Are not
have been
aware
there
of.
for a long time.
Yeah,
You know.
yeah.
But yeah,
So I guess I have a question more from the standpoint with notifying neighbors, whatever. So a lot of our subdivisions have HOAs. So if we move forwards with this and allow them, so then would it be up to those with HOAs to address their covenants as whether they would allow them within those
Yes.
subdivisions?
Yep, because the HOA is completely different. They have their own set of rules. It's a contract with each owner. They can allow them or not, depending on how it's written. That likely will be, I know a lot of the HOAs have scenarios where you can't have outbuildings. So it couldn't be a detached house. It'd have to be something in. From my perspective, when I first started looking at this several years ago, the issues that came to my mind were stormwater. You know,
Yeah.
which is the 30% coverage that Will was talking about. You know, if you limit the amount of lot coverage, it's the less and less impermeable surface means less and less stormwater. So that's a concern. And then ingress, egress into the lot for parking. That's, yeah. Parking can be a bear in dense neighborhoods already. And they don't even have to be that dense to have issues with parking. So that becomes a scenario that you have to be cautious with. And Will had mentioned some require off-street parking for the unit. One thing that Will did mention, and a lot of other cities talk about that I want to highlight, it's slightly different. A front yard building can be problematic if you're talking about a standard 30-foot setback development area. But if you've got a house that's on a big enough lot, the front yard setback is going to be 30 feet. That house may be 150 feet back. So is it the front yard as the zoning ordinance talks about, or is it in front of the main house? So they're different. Our code would say it can't be anywhere closer than 30 feet from the road, just like the main house. But if the main house is way back, they could build it up front. Is that something you want to look at? So those are the things that we'll need to start talking about. What I hope to do, will be that over the next month before our April meeting, that you all start thinking about it, maybe do a little side research. Will's got on your screen, you've got QR codes. I couldn't think of the name. I was stumbling there. You got QR codes that will take you to research that should make it a lot easier to see what other communities are doing and get a lot of those issues, how they're handling them, to see what you think would be in our best interest. I know several of you were directly involved in the comprehensive planning process. Were directly involved in the conversations that were going on in, you know, at least 3 of the pillar groups. So you're aware of what that is. And obviously, as planning commissioners, you have a vested interest in your community. So you kind of know what's good and what's bad. That's the hard part about these. Some parts are excellent, some parts are horrible. And you just have to kind of cull out the wheat for the chaff and go from there. Not everybody's going to be happy either way you go. So, last thing I would throw out there, the enforceability issues Will had mentioned, we don't have any of them significantly in our code now because we don't allow them. So there isn't an issue. If that becomes an issue, the easiest enforcement methodology that I can think of is a CUP or special use permit. They have to come and get a CUP for it. There are very specific rules on what happens with conditional use permits, what happens if you violate it. All of those enforcement mechanisms become available. And they would have to be a part of your application for CUP. You'd have to identify all those things that we need you to identify. If it's going to be owner occupy, you have to state that in there. And that if it violates, then you've got a violation of your conditional use permit and it can be revoked. That's when you trigger the removal of the offending structure.
Yeah, I think at minimum, we probably would want to set it up for conditional use permit for any of these, really.
It also gives you a better, at least initially, it gives you a better understanding. And I will tell you historically here in Smithville, my research indicates on new things like this, They're always a CUP. And then after many years of going through it, we finally go, oh, well, I think we've got this figured out. We can probably set parameters and go from there. Good
So-
example would be electronic signs. Every electronic sign in town initially had to have a conditional use permit with all kinds of parameters on it. And, 10 or 12 years ago, we finally said, well, here are the parameters. This is where the commission always goes with these. Can we just write an ordinance that does exactly what you've been saying? And that's what we did. So that way, we're not bringing up, I want to put up a portable changeable sign or whatever every time. It make it a little easier for businesses, and we get the regulations that this commission and the board had talked about all along anyway. It just gives us some time to flesh it out.
I have another question. I know we talked about this during the comprehensive plan and had quite a bit of discussion then. So have you had anybody come to you asking to do this?
Yes,
Okay,
about once or twice a year.
okay.
It's regular. The first one I recall was about 12 or 13 years ago. And they came up with they had a builder and they were going to build an in-law quarters and they had a perfect plan, except for their plan in R1B, the way they had it in the same house, effectively made it a duplex. Because you couldn't communicate between the two units. They were on either side of a garage. Well, that is the classic example of a duplex, but they were able to convert and make a hallway between the two that was conditioned space, so air conditioned and heated, with doors on either end. That took it away from being a duplex scenario. And in that scenario, any home in Smithville currently, you can have as many kitchens as you want, but you can't have a kitchen in an outbuilding. And that's to keep that kitchen from becoming an accessory, basically another place for someone to live. That's the purpose behind it.
What regulations do we have now to stop somebody from just parking a trailer, plugging in a?
We have zoning and police power regulations associated with that.
Okay.
You get 14 days, I think it is, on any given lot
And as far as.
per year. Sorry.
As far as the definition for ADU, I mean, we're talking about something that's gonna be a permanent structure, right? I mean, because I'm just thinking of a few scenarios where someone may park a trailer if they're building a house or if they're renovating a house. It may take them a couple of years. I mean, we don't.
And we have provisions for construction related and that kind of thing. And in that scenario, they have to come before this commission to get approval if they want to have a camper that they live in while they build their house themselves out on ag land or something. That's usually where it is. But we have provisions in place for that. The goal is to not have people setting up travel trailers in their yard and renting them out to people to live in it.
And as far as you want us to like kind of do some little bit of research, I mean, would you like us just to maybe send you some emails of things that we find to help you guys?
Yep,
with your
if you would
draft?
send an email to Will and I, not to the others, but just to
Yes.
Will and I, that way we avoid the meeting requirement. You send it to Will and I, then we will be able to compile something based upon that. And if you get it to us at least a week before, so by April 1st, because the meeting's on April 8th. So if you get us to it, get us any comments, questions, or things you'd like to see, that will allow us to try and boil it down into something a little more palatable, and we can start to get a framework.
So does that give you enough time with the amount of stuff we have on the agenda next month?
Yeah, well,
Okay.
yeah, well. The good thing is, on this one, I got a great guy working on it. He's been doing a lot of the research, so he'll be able to assemble it all. Because the presentation, that slide deck, 100% Will, he did it all.
That's very nice.
So I want to thank him for doing such a good job, and thank him for coming in to work a little late. If there are no further questions, then I'll put it back to the chairman to either adjourn or whatever you want if there are no questions.
Good for tonight?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right, call it.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. We're done. Bye.